Should we give the mayor a touch more time?
Study session of the Aurora City Council for Monday, November 3rd, 2025 is called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Kaufman,
Here.
Councilmember Bergen,
Here.
Councilmember Coombs,
Present.
Councilmember Gardner,
Here.
Councilmember Hancock,
Here.
Councilmember Drinsky,
Here.
Councilmember Casal,
Here.
Councilmember Lawson,
Here.
Councilmember Medina,
Here.
Councilmember Murillo, Mayor Pro Tem Sundberg.
Here.
There's no mayor update. Are there any issue updates? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving the consent calendar forward? Item number 2A through to
M.
the 3B?
No, to M.
No, I'm sorry, to 2M. Item number 2A through 2M. Is there any objection to moving that forward? I'm seeing none. Item number 5A, implement earn wellness program for Aurora Police Department. And I worked on this with Councilmember Hancock.
3A.
And this effectively, I'm sorry.
I think we're on 3A.
Oh, okay, ouch. 3A, Housing Unified Development Ordinance, Councilmember Bergen.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we didn't have enough time at the last study session, so bringing this forward now, and it's basically staff's year of work on the UDO, and so I will turn it over to Brennan Camarada.
Thank you, Councilperson Bergen. Appreciate that. And Chris, if you want to go ahead and share the presentation, I'll make the introduction. So good afternoon. My name is Brandon Camarada. I'm a manager in the Planning and Business Development Department. And I'm also the staff project manager for this project, small lots, compact housing in the city of Aurora. So thanks so much for your time today. I think we have 50 minutes, so we have a lot to cover today. This is basically the same presentation that we made in October to the PED committee. And they recommended that we bring this to the full city council in a study session. So here we are today. Here's an overview of the agenda. First, we'll touch on what we've been working on this summer. We started this project, I believe the end of May is when we started officially. And so we've been working with the development community through a number of listening sessions, roundtables, collecting input, getting direction on the perception of the development community. We've also conducted a code audit, and we'll touch on those in the presentation. As we get into the presentation, we'll also introduce the 3 themes of areas of improvement for our code. So keep an eye open for those. They'll be pretty clear in the presentation. Those would be greenfield, infill, and design standards. So before we jump right in, I'll give just a little bit of context since this is our first time with the full council about why we're here to begin with a little bit. So with the adoption of the UDO in 2019, one of the main additions to the zoning code with the UDO was enabling a variety of small lot options for compact housing. These include things like you've probably heard green courts, motor courts, a variety of configurations of townhomes. These approaches have been largely used to the maximum extent permitted by code for the last 5 years. And so the big parameters in code kind of right now that we're looking to address through this project is small lots are currently limited to the eastern part of the city, also known as subarea C. And then within subarea C, they're limited to a percentage of the master planned areas. So over the last few years, we've had continued interest from the development community to be able to, one, look at using small lots in other parts of the community besides out east. And then two, when developing out east under big master plan developments, be able to look at larger percentages of small lots. And so those are key pieces of the genesis of this project, along with ideas about supporting the market and being able to provide additional price points for residents and things like that. So with that said, we're looking to expand those things. And then another key component in doing so is being able to continue to have communities designed to support livable and sustainable neighborhoods. And in the backup, you have that as your design principles, neighborhood design principles. So with that said, I think we can go ahead and jump into the presentation. I'd like to introduce Chris Brewster. He'll lead this discussion today. Chris is a vice president with Multi-Studio, and he is our project lead with Multi-Studio and be taking the lead helping us draft these code amendments with the discussion and direction we get from you all today. So with that, over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Brandon. Good afternoon, Council and Mayor. Again, I'm Chris Brewster with Multi-Studio. This is just a quick introduction of where we're at in our timeline. So a lot of work has gone in to getting to this point, but we haven't yet really begun drafting the code amendments we think are possible. So this is a good check-in point with you all. And as Brandon mentioned, it was the same or similar check-in with the PD committee a few weeks ago. The other point about this slide is we are progressing and hoping to introduce actual code amendments into the adoption process sometime in January, and from there we'll take through whatever processes are necessary to get to adoption, but look for something formal to be introduced around that time frame, which means ultimately that over November and December we will be drafting and vetting different drafts and strategies that we work on from this point forward. As Brandon mentioned, a few key things about this timeline, the listening sessions and preliminary feedback we got from the development community and other stakeholders that we did one-on-one calls or one-on-one meetings with were consistent with all of those things Brandon mentioned in the RFP and how the project was outlined. And I think as you'll see from our own independent code audit, it was consistent in that regard too. So all three things were pointing in the right direction and pointing us to some of the strategies we'll talk about this evening. This is a summary of our code audit. Some of the preliminary findings were, one, it's just a little bit cumbersome, as what Brandon mentioned about the small lots and targeting Area C. There's layers of different standards that when the UDO was updated, it was clear that we did not want to disrupt too much of what had been part of the older development of Aurora and existing zoning districts. So the way it was injected into Area C causes a little bit of a layer of complexity in the code that we think can, now that the staff has worked with it and the development community has worked with those standards, we think we can simplify and do a little bit more coordination and consolidation of housing types and have a more comprehensive approach across all residential zoning districts and across all areas A, B, and C. That will allow us to do two key things. One, be leveraging different distinctions between your different zone districts, particularly R1 and R2, where some of these smaller format housing types and more neighborhood scale housing types are addressed, and then emphasize context distinctions between sub areas A, B, and C. And I'll have a little bit more on that a little later. The other part about the code audit that was important is we think, as far as the design standards are and the approach, it appears that the city is regulating all of the right things, and some of this was reinforced through our meetings with the developer roundtable. However, our own assessment and what we heard from frequent users of the code is it's far too complex. So it's difficult to get to the right answer. And there's, to some extent, there's a lack of flexibility in some of the right answers. So the code may be pushing in the right directions, but it's not as easy as it needs to be. And it also doesn't adapt well to different situations where flexibility might be needed. And so we're taking a look at those. And then the last element of the code audit was you have a number of important outside or parallel efforts that are going on that we need to be coordinating with, primarily the connecting Aurora transportation plan, the city's first citywide transportation plan. As you'll see, streetscapes and connectivity are really important parts about neighborhoods, particularly when you're developing more density in a mix of housing types. The second one would be the PROS update, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space updates that are going on, and really coordinating these neighborhood scaled open spaces with what Parks is doing there. And so we've been in communication with those departments to try and make sure we're working in step with those two outside efforts. The focus areas, this is where the developer roundtable conversation started, and you can begin to see a lot of alignment with our own code audit and with the RFP goals that Brandon mentioned. So the first, small lot options in sub areas A and B. I have a slide on that in a moment that will bring that to light. And as was observed by Councilmember Bergen at the PD meeting, it will appear somewhat counterintuitive that why aren't we doing that in areas A and B and only in C? So that's one thing we're looking at. Brandon hinted at the current standards put some limits on how many small lots you can do, and they do that for good reasons. You don't want neighborhoods of all of the same thing and sort of this pattern of just the same thing over and over to great extent. But we do believe there's a simpler way to get a mix of product types that's not so regimented on focusing on small lots and figuring out what we're counting there. Looking at more options and patterns for different small lots. I think here, both the code audit and some of the things we talked about with the technical committee, we don't envision uncovering any new things or things that are even smaller lots than you currently have. We think, you have a good range of options, and it's more about fitting in where and how they can go, but we might find some more flexibility there. The last ones deal more with on the design side, flexibility of parking options, which we'll focus on specifically later in this conversation. Improving options for affordable and infill. So we are trying to coordinate with the city's other efforts that affect affordability and attainability. And then simplification and adding flexibility to the design standards. And then an overarching one of just making sure the processes are as easy and streamlined as possible. So this is where we're at right now. This is sort of a snapshot of your current UDO and what it does to small lots. On the right, you can see the sub areas that Brandon mentioned that are in your code now, and they're used to make distinctions in your code. They roughly align with the places, the Aurora Places plan of neighborhoods, both old Aurora, established neighborhoods, and emerging neighborhoods. They also roughly align with our assessment of development patterns of thinking of urban neighborhoods, 70s to 90s suburban neighborhoods, and then area C, mainly the new evolving pattern of suburban neighborhoods and what's new and different about housing today compared to 20 or 30 years ago. So those context filters we think are very good, very important, and can be strengthened, and they align well with your plan. When you look at the left side of the screen of what's currently enabled of different housing types at this sort of lower end neighborhood scale of the mix of housing, you just see the glaring gaps in areas A and B. You know, if they're allowed in area C, why not area A and B, as Councilmember Berger mentioned at the PED committee meeting. So that's a big point of where we're going from where you're at currently. As far as context, the neighborhood design principles, we've created some outside documents on these 5 main principles. These are, in essence, planning best practices as you're mixing more things, more housing types, developing more compactly. There's a community design aspect of that's very crucial in creating long-term value and creating quality, sustainable neighborhoods, as Brandon mentioned. And these are very prevalent in your current code. They're primarily prevalent for the small lot housing options in Area C, those things that that are put in to make sure small lot development is carried out. And so we do think we want to strengthen these as we move forward. One of the things we've observed is you may be treating these neighborhood design principles slightly different between areas A, B, and C, or maybe in some cases significantly different, with yet to be determined. But we do think everything we do needs to be simplifying but strengthening and reinforcing these important principles in the current code. These are also used by staff for when there's deviations asked for in master plans or through variances. And so they're a good jumping off point of the more we can ingrain these into the code, the less discretionary or deviations we may have. We just simply, the more we strengthen these, the more options we think we can make streamlined and easier to build. So shifting to the 4 policy issues that Brandon mentioned, I'll walk through, or 3 of them. 2 of them are related to design, but the first one is greenfield and increasing small lot options in Area C. We think there's 2 ways of doing that. First, reconsidering the formulas that I mentioned earlier. Those are essentially depending on the scale of your project and the types of products you're building. There's a very formulaic limit to the number of lots. So whether it's 25%, 40%, or I think 60% might be an extended threshold. There's limits there, and they're in there for a good reason, but we think it's becoming too formulaic, and the more we strengthen those neighborhood design principles, the less we need to be counting the actual numbers of lots, and the more we can look at neighborhoods and the mix and transition of housing more holistically. And that may give the developers some flexibility on going beyond what the current code limits as far as small lots, and that may increase the amounts or at least the applicability of small lots in different contexts in Area C. The second big one is through flexibility in the green court design. The green court design is something we're familiar with. In fact, the images on the right are an example of that. Essentially what that is housing that may not necessarily front on a street, but based on a limited scale plan that addresses the necessary connectivity, the utilities, and emergency access. It's acceptable to allow some houses to front on different spaces. The feedback from the roundtable was that the current standards are too regimented, and that we need to look at being more flexible of how homes can be arranged around these green courts. And that's a theme that will run through areas A, B, and C, but it's the one area that perhaps can open up some new opportunities in area C. And again, all of those options we think are based on both at the same time strengthening but simplifying how the standards address those 5 neighborhood design principles: street and pedestrian connectivity, public realm and streetscape design, the mix and extent of housing types you're doing, access to open space, and then proximity to activity centers and mixed use. That's one of the larger community benefits of having this increased housing option, is to support some of the other things that come along with it beyond the neighborhood. The second major one is infill, so shifting those same questions to areas A and B. The policy reasons for doing that are, one, maximizing your return on existing infrastructure in developed areas. Over time, communities find some of those areas may be underutilized or maybe aging housing types that's happening there. So strengthening that investment in already developed areas is important. That reinvestment can also support some of your existing mixed use areas and corridors. We've also observed that you do have some underutilized sites, some of those leftover spaces that are left without options. And the small lot patterns and things could be good options for those areas in areas A and B as well. And then last, these are the areas where we think it's actually most appropriate to be developing in these patterns, largely because they're some of your established walkable neighborhoods already, and they are your most transit served areas too. Through the process, we have been made aware of there's obviously demand for this because these are just some examples of some of the projects you've seen, everything from just one lot development as infill that might be putting in duplexes or townhomes to block or even larger than block master plan development with some of these leftover or underutilized areas. So these projects are already happening, and it's learning from these and trying to streamline how they got done to make them more effective and leverage them for that infill investment. Shifting to the design issues, and these issues will span across areas A, B, and C, but they might be different between areas A, B, and C is one of the things that we're paying attention to. The first is with regard to building design, and this is the area where we got a lot of good feedback from the developer roundtable. Essentially, they would like their architects to have a little bit more flexibility in how buildings are evaluated from a design standpoint. Our own observation on the code audit is this is the area where we said you're essentially regulating all of the right things in terms of building design, but maybe not doing so in as clear and a direct way. And what that tends to do is it allows create some confusion or uncertainty, and maybe results in just kind of checking boxes and doing things even though they may not make sense to the overall design intent. So one of the ways we look at building in flexibility is really strengthening the design intent of all of the standards up front. So narrowing down what we really truly care about in terms of building design and making sure that's emphasized first and foremost. And that will fall from kind of better organizing your design standards. We're in the process now of kind of aligning them, and they're in different sections of the code, and we want to align them not only for these building types, but this is the one that we think they can apply to the small detached homes, the attached homes, and then moving all the way up to multifamily buildings. Although they may apply in different ways, if we're taking a similar approach to building design, the standards can appear more organized and more intuitive. And then from there, we try to get more objective measures, but then do that with options. That's sort of the way of getting predictability, but some flexibility in the code as well. So simplifying all the building design standards is something we want to work on in terms of building design. And again, not losing any of the intent behind all of your standards because they are pushing in the right directions. The second one has become is one we're discussing is review of the masonry requirement. This does go towards the idea of specifically trying to reduce some of the prices and costs. We view the masonry requirement as it's a proxy for quality and durability. Masonry just inherently has a deeper, richer texture, and so sometimes it can make a simply designed or even not the best design appear as quality. However, we also know that things designed without masonry can exhibit some of those same qualities as well. So we want to have a community conversation about where and how we might relax or reduce some of the masonry requirements, what things we might do in the alternative, and are we making distinctions of that masonry requirement by context or building type. That kind of goes along with the above category of simplifying it. We know the masonry requirement's been in Aurora and around Aurora for a long time, and so we want to be very intentional with anything we do with this standard, but at least we've heard from the development community an interest in doing that. And there's a clear understanding that the expectation would be you need to be meeting the quality and durability goals equally or better than with the masonry requirement. The second major design issue we've heard and discussed in our preliminary discussions is parking flexibility. Our assessment of your parking requirements is that they're about right. In other words, we don't think parking flexibility means reducing the parking requirement in any means. I think most of these housing types are coming with a same or similar parking demand that you have in your code, and it would only be in very walkable contexts or transit served contexts, or areas where you have a certain targeted population that we would expect to see a reduced demand in parking. And a lot of the areas where small lot development is being built right now doesn't have that. So the parking requirement we think is about right. Your code also has some options for the granting those low demand reductions. You already have a transit, some flexibility in transit served areas. You have some flexibility with affordable housing or age restricted housing. So our assessment is that we may need some small tweaks to that flexibility, but essentially the code is set up so that parking would not be a barrier to any of these housing types in the right location, either cost wise or regulatory wise, because you do have those options to reconsider a lesser demand. The bigger thing we think could be looked at is the location and design. So thinking of parking as a resource at the block or larger scale can really open up it can allow parking to be designed much more efficiently, less driveway, less curb cuts, less parking lane aisles, more clusters of parking. And then it also does a good job of protecting those 5 neighborhood design principles we mentioned earlier of protecting the streetscape. So considering more remote or block scale consolidated parking, the photos on the right are a project example from the Fort Collins area that looked at parking at the block scale and sort of unbundled it from the unit, and it opens up a lot of options and opportunities for smaller lots and more compact housing. It also opens up the opportunity to stage parking differently. So your current requirement is that detached houses and 2-family houses have to have an attached or at least a enclosed parking space. You can see from the example on the right that there's a range of options, some enclosed, some not, and we think there's probably even other options to consider that would allow you to stage those parking spaces maybe a little bit differently and give the developer some flexibility in doing so. And then the third aspect of this is one of the key resources of neighborhoods.
Hey, have a good weekend.
Are
Or no, it's a good night. I
preserving
guess
the
it's Monday.
on-street parking elements, and so that means
Did you have a
also
good weekend?
protecting the curb area and curb space from too many driveways and curb cuts, so
Huh?
that on-street parking can really be
Yeah,
used
is
and
your grandson
leverages that
okay?
guest parking or secondary parking for homes that may have more cars than the code would require. So our observation is that helps manage and balance the allocation of that resource really well. So that kind of concludes our really quick view from where we've been and where we think we're going. So from here, our ask is to say, does the city council endorse us proceeding in this direction and beginning to draft some of the amendments based on these themes for future consideration? So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions or things you want me to jump back to.
I have a question, Mayor Mike Hoffman, and that is that I think what is such an eyesore in small lots is when you have single-family detached small lot homes with front-loaded parking, I guess, the parking in the front. So I think it becomes an eyesore over time. And I think so, 2 things. I think an attached product is so much better on R1A, where there's a common area element in terms of taking care of things like the landscaping and other issues. And then I also think I strongly prefer alleyways, the parking in the rear of the property instead of on the front of the property and on the street on small lots. But can you tell me how those are addressed in what you're doing?
Yes. So first of all, the city does have some current standards that look at mitigating garage driveway access points. So that's one of the areas where we think the code is pushing in the correct direction. We also think that maybe there are other options that we need to be considering. So that parking flexibility that I just mentioned above is directly related to that. The more options we give to think of parking differently, the more we can protect those key elements of neighborhoods and developing more compactly, which are streetscape, frontages, engaging frontages. So you are correct. And essentially it's the narrower your lot gets, the more a driveway and garage conflicts with the goals of neighborhood design. In other words, it's not just about what that house is doing. It's a compounding factor down the street and block, which affects the whole neighborhood design. So we do believe that there is a threshold of below a certain lot width, we need to be looking at other options. We're in the process of kind of determining that, and we think your code at least is on the right track in that direction.
Can you speak to the value of a small lot, single family versus small lot, single family attached products?
Yeah, I think one, the attached product gains you efficiency in the building format and layout. And essentially what that does is that allows you to approach the access and parking differently. So for example, we some of our educational materials that we have are looking at precedents and prototypes of this exact thing. So if you took 3 detached homes that each were garage loaded and front driveway loaded, if you attach those and you essentially get the same or maybe even an extra unit in the same space, now all of a sudden a single driveway can go down the rear and have either attached or detached garages from the rear of that. So it creates a really good opportunity to be efficient with parking and access, because you've essentially taken 4 driveways, reduced them to 1, and you also increase the parking capacity of a lot. So by getting that access back, we can show that each of those lots can now park 2 or maybe even 3 cars easily on them. So there's an efficiency there as well.
Well, and the homeowners association becomes responsible for the vegetation or the landscaping versus the individual owners who may or may not take care of it. Let's see, I'm sorry. We have Councilmember Hancock and then Councilmember Bergen. Councilmember Hancock.
Thank you, Mayor. My question, I have 2 questions actually. How does this current, how does the UDO provide flexibility primarily through, use tables, form-based options, for allowing developers to have design freedom in terms of materials? You mentioned masonry before. I'm thinking in terms of, what if they wanted to use steel? What if they wanted to use some other kind of material? Are we restricting their ability to use different types of products in their building format?
Yeah, I'll let Brandon or other staff correct me if I'm wrong, but we've been focusing a little bit on the flexibility from the masonry, but we plan to address the whole range of materials. I'm not recalling off the top of my head from our code audit of how restrictive you were to other materials on residential, but it wouldn't surprise me if you are so. And we are familiar with different options of, I think architectural metals, if I'm not required, are permitted. And then it may be a matter of being more clear with what those are, so the expectation is set. But I think the code does allow some of those options now.
Okay, thank you. And my second question would be, considering the water restrictions that we have right now in these newer communities, how is planning working with, for example, you have this green space between the street and then the sidewalk, and then you have this little slip of green space between the sidewalk and the house? Or are we going to allow some flexibility with that especially for the smaller lot units, where they can gain more front yard space, if you will, when you're going up and down those sidewalks for a visually appealing look, but also giving the front yards a little more space?
Yeah, we are looking at that. I don't know exactly if we have a solution or conclusion yet. This is one where we'll be leaning heavily on other departments. Obviously, water services and parks are intimately involved in those. I would say from our perspective of doing codes in Colorado, I think most of the frontage designs and that social space you're talking about, and the streetscape, which we think is really critical to have that kind of buffer between the street and pedestrian areas with street trees. Those can all be done in very water efficient ways, including street trees. You'll see a lot of the Denver Regional Council of Governments has great water-wise guidelines. Your own code is very progressive in terms of water management on those areas. So I think we would certainly be aware that all those things we need to do need to be done in the most water efficient way possible. We don't think it means sacrificing those spaces. They can be designed in a very water efficient way.
And can I get one more?
Please, go ahead.
Since the mayor, you were talking about the possibility of having, particularly on the small lots, the rear facing parking, again, to, incentivize people being more neighborly. And it looks better when you don't have a bunch of garages in the front, particularly with those small areas. Most people have 2 cars or more. So is there going to be any allowances for these additional cars so that people aren't parking up and down the streets? Or are you planning something in these communities where there would be more communal parking? What does that look like?
Yeah, good question. That is the one that the 3 points I'll raise there is one, that's why we think your code is about right. We don't think a parking reduction will be appropriate at most of these locations because, as you said, there's 2 or maybe even likely 3 cars. That is why the sort of block scale or remote or getting different access strategies is important, because it's a balance, right? It's a what's the balance of the neighborhood and frontage design versus we want to park the site appropriately. So we're doing some analysis that shows that some of these alternative patterns, whether it's a single drive to the back, whether it's a shared drive among different housing, or even a partial alley, if there's a reluctance to build alleys and alley loaded, there's still some benefits from thinking of access and parking in a more collective, although sub-block scale manner, because you actually do get more parking spaces. So people would be able to go beyond the minimum parking requirement in a lot of these configurations. The most efficient way is the alley, because we'll be prepared to show that most of these housing types, even the narrow lots, can park upwards of 2, 3, or 4 cars on the lot, even at the most narrow lot, where when you do it front loaded, it's not always the case that you're getting those efficiencies. The third level is what you mentioned for the on-street parking, and we do think that's important, that yes, it can handle some of that overflow from the car or from the household that might have a larger number of cars, and that tends to balance out among the neighborhood if we really protect on-street parking. But more importantly, that on-street parking serves as the guest parking that you need if you have visitors or have an event or something like that.
Councilmember Bergen.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Chris, for the presentation. I know staff and you have done a lot of work with all the roundtables and one-on-one meetings to get kind of an idea of what we need to change. And I think just in closing, we're trying to get to a point where we can have a little bit of flexibility. I thought it was a little bit crazy that small lots were not allowed in sub-area A and B, where you had transit-oriented development. And we're also wanting people to have ownership and not just rent apartments. So I think this is going to help it move forward to have some options in some of the more established neighborhoods to be able to have that ownership and home pride. And then I think also just making sure that we have flexibility is great. Without sacrificing quality. I think we've come a long ways over decades to make Aurora look really very desirable. So just say thank you.
Councilmember Coons.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is just, and this is probably informed somewhat by connecting Aurora, but I've had a few conversations with staff about parallel routes in relation to transit and bike and pedestrian access. So as we're looking at neighborhood livability and sustainability, is there any consideration for addressing how we can establish parallel routes to our arterials?
Yeah, one of the principles that we have related to pedestrian and street networks and connectivity is the idea that the sub-arterial streets actually become the most important streets, because they do several things. They provide that alternative connection that you want and need, and they also can allow the arterials to not carry such a heavy load in transportation and become barriers. So there's a particular section of your code that talks about connectivity of those streets right now, and it does show some graphics that we think are really helpful, and it shows the collectors connecting out at regular intervals. Our observation is what it doesn't do is say that those collectors need to actually have a continuity to them as well. So that might be something that in Connecting Aurora we look at. And what I mean by that is the collector shouldn't simply be a means to get to the arterial. If it's continuous and can travel across several different arterials, then it now becomes that secondary outlet that you're talking about. And all of the streets can actually have a much more multimodal and even higher capacity design to them. And then the trick is making sure that those are pleasant streets to front on as well. And so there's ways to do that. We'll be expanding on that topic in some of our educational materials to look at different models. The second aspect about that you've heard from that we heard from the roundtable is there's also something in the code called the two-turn rule, which is staff's current way of getting connectivity of those sub streets, and it affects the block structure of how houses are laid out, and the developers have asked for more flexibility with that. We're kind of cautious of giving more flexibility to any connectivity standard because it's so important, but we do believe if those collector or sub-arterial streets are continuous and provide those secondary routes that you mentioned, then that sub-block structure can be a lot more flexible in how it's laid out. And so we're beginning to collect some examples of that and use that as part of our discussion material on where the code is updated.
Excellent. Thank you.
Walkability.
Yes.
Yeah. But I guess that's probably in a bigger question than small lots in terms of developing walkable neighborhoods where we're integrating some retail component. Older Denver neighborhoods are really, I think, well structured that are walkable, and people can walk to retail, people can walk to services, all those things.
Yes, and it's a key point. It's one of the 5 principles, right? That idea of access to mixed use and activity centers. So it is on our minds. We aren't amending any of the mixed use districts. That's out of our scope right now. But one of the biggest reasons for developing these housing types is to support those centers and to be able to put housing closer to them so that walkability does improve. We've looked at some of the areas that have been doing that in your newer neighborhoods, and some really well, some good attempts but not as well. And one of the things we've observed is when people are just reserving that arterial corner for a mixed use product, those are the ones that tend to stagnate, and then it takes time and patience to build those in very walkable patterns, and they might then, it becomes a convenience center or a gas station because it's accessed by 2 major streets. So that continuity of collector streets that we just mentioned is also key to where those smaller scale mixed use centers locate, because a lot of times they will not locate on those arterial corners, but they get more embedded in the neighborhoods as well. So yes, a huge point of this effort as well.
Is there further discussion on the direction that staff is seeking? Is there any objection to the direction that staff is seeking? Okay, then that's the way we'll move forward. Thank you very much. Just wonderful presentation. Thanks everybody who worked on this, Councilmember Bergen and your committee for all their work on this, as well as staff. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Item number 3B, socioeconomic sales and services impact permit. Councilmember Jurinski.
I will turn it over to Trevor to give the presentation and then allow my colleagues the opportunity to hack it up however they would like.
Okay. Mr. Trevor Vaughn.
Trevor Vaughn, manager of licensing. This was presented at the last study session, so I won't subject you to the same presentation again. Just as a refresher for City Council, this is a proposed permit mainly dealing with distance restrictions on specific types of businesses to prevent concentration of those in areas of town. Moving forward, it does grandfather in existing businesses, and it's attached to the general business license. So I think with that, I think council wanted additional discussion on this item.
Let me just say that I think this is very important. I think that I think there's an exploitation in lower economic in lower income areas where these businesses coalesce in really a predatory economic system, and I think that this seeks to deal with that. Further questions or comments on item number 3B? Seeing none, is there?
I got one.
Okay,
You don't
I'm sorry,
mind?
Mayor Protem.
Thank you, sir. Trevor, this would set a distance requirement between convenience stores.
It would, specifically convenience stores that we sell regulated substances, alcohol or tobacco. So like for like businesses as proposed in this ordinance would be set at 2,000 feet distance restriction. So it doesn't mean that a convenience store couldn't locate in there, but if they were going to be kind of that classic corner store with the substances, that would be impacted.
So pretty much every convenience store, you can get a 6-pack of Modelo and a can of Red Man or Skull, right? I mean, so that would include those, and they could not be catty corner. They could not be across the street from each other at an intersection anymore.
As proposed, yes, in the ordinance.
But Trevor, this is perspective, right? This
Correct.
is not, we're
Correct.
not taking businesses' licenses away. If somebody goes out of business, then that's an issue with a new business coming in, or a new business wanting to come in that we're looking at, but we're not closing, just because of proximity, we're not closing existing businesses. I think that's important.
But in the future, 6 months from now, if a convenience store wanted to be across the street from another, that would not be allowed, right?
Trevor, yes.
That's correct. If they're going to be, selling the classic alcohol, tobacco substances as we've defined it now, they could, if they don't sell those substances, be kind of a general convenience store. But yeah,
I think the majority of them do. This one scares me actually. Yep. When I was, hearing about Denver banning gas stations from being within a certain amount of, I just really thought of the unintended consequences of that, and how very much different they are in their city council from ours, is being pro-business and setting these types of restrictions. And they were retroactive in theirs, in which that affected folks, businesses, developers with permits and planning already in place, and it invited lawsuits. But this sort of rubs the cat the wrong way with me as someone who looks to the free market, as someone who looks to the Constitution to guide us. Suddenly, and are we in the business of determining what types of businesses can and cannot go where? That gets a little sticky, and I do believe there's unintended consequences to these. I get the intent of it, that we don't want businesses preying upon the underserved, so to speak. We banned massage parlors, right? There was prostitution involved with those. I totally get that. I totally support that. But these are legally, a 6-pack Modelo is legal at a convenience store, and bars, liquor stores, convenience stores are simply very convenient. And then we're bringing in longer term hotel extended stay places. I just think we're treading into territory here that is anti-business. I mean, this is just me speaking from a business point of view. I think we're crossing over into an area that we haven't before. And so I'm really hesitant with this one and opposed.
Councilmember Combs.
Thanks, Mayor. So I also understand the concern that Councilmember Jurinski is trying to address and that you've stated, Mayor, and I do think we need to have something in place. I do want to also add that with respect to the gas stations. I've been in some specific conversations with staff, so we can set that aside as a different conversation than this one, since this is not specific to gas stations. I do want to just kind of, and Trevor did send me some information that helped address my concerns about potential discrimination. I do want to make sure that we have some discussion about that when this comes to the floor, that we talk about the ways in which the, I'm forgetting the name right now, but the modeling that's being used can actually prevent rather than reinforcing discrimination. So I'm going to support this moving forward to the floor, but I do think we need to have a more robust conversation about any potential unintended discriminatory impacts of having a license in a code like this.
Councilmember Casal.
So I know I talked to Councilman Daniel on this, but is this gonna have a space requirement for like school zone area and park and recreation, Trevor?
Did you say from schools and parks?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that was not built into this ordinance. There is currently distance restrictions from schools for the under the state tobacco license of 500 feet. Same with alcohol is 500 feet from those. But this did not put in distance restrictions from parks and schools as proposed.
Councilmember, I'm sorry. Okay, anything else, Councilmember Casal?
No, can we added that? I mean, as a requirement?
That's up to council. Yeah, I mean, there's no technical reason we couldn't.
Councilmember Bergen.
Trevor, can you just refresh my memory from last time? This is having them get a permit, correct?
Correct. The permit will be issued simultaneously with the general business license, so fairly seamlessly. It'll automatically issue to existing businesses. New businesses would have this permit kind of tack on with the general business license.
Okay, so if they're existing business, they get it automatically. Okay,
correct.
And then new business, and so the thought behind the permit is then, if they are not adhering to our laws with respect to vaping for minors and so forth, then you would have more grounds to, I guess, enforce the laws than just code enforcement. Again, if you could clarify that for me.
Yeah, so it kind of gives a little extra tool to use. So it references, if one of these businesses is in what we call an area of elevated risk and they're having public nuisance violations or they're not taking care of their property, there's a pattern of that. It can be both an aggravating factor for, whatever licensure they hold outside of this, as well as potentially, a way to revoke this permit if that's happening. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Sundberg, Councilmember Hancock, and then Councilmember Gardner.
Thank you. So it does require permitting, but it also restricts other businesses from entering certain areas based on distance, right? Like in the
Correct.
future. Okay, so a lot of convenience stores have pump gas, right? The newer ones that we're seeing, and a lot of existing ones. So it would factor those in as well. A convenience store that has 6-pack of Modelo and pumps gas. Now, one of the greatest things about, I have an electric vehicle now, and I had a diesel, and I would deliberately go to a gas station at Iliff and Buckley that was right next to King Soopers gas, and they competed with each other. And I was the benefit. I benefited from their aggressive pricing war, right? It was the best place for me to get diesel fuel based on a competitive marketplace. So that's one thing we're taking away when we do this, is a couple of convenience stores next to each other that happen to pump gas. that the consumer will pay higher pricing for gasoline and fuel in the future, likely if there's only one allowed. And then the free market dictates which one will be there and which one will not. And so, in a lot of these convenience stores with gas stations, they sell more food than they do gas. So it's not just about gas stations. So I think we're edging out the consumer, and this one kind of scares me, guys.
And let me just say that we're trying to revitalize the Colfax corridor, and this concentration of these businesses that feed off the poor, feed off a lot of homeless individuals, or a barrier to moving the economy forward.
Well, here, hold on just a second. I want to say that at Colfax and Havana, that was a law enforcement issue. We had a police chief at that time, or a number of them, that were not enforcing the law, not allowing proactive policing to happen. It was a drug-infested area, constant shoplifting from the same people every day. So that it was a law enforcement issue. And then in the presentation, Trevor provided a liquor store that has this god-awful frontage, right, neglected for years. That's code enforcement. So we can take this on with law enforcement and code enforcement before taking on these drastic steps.
Councilmember Hancock.
I understand the intention of this ordinance, and I support it to the degree that tobacco, liquor, marijuana stores, they have the right to operate, but no business has the right to harm the neighborhood. And when you talk about Colfax, that whole area, it has and is defined by bootleg clothing stores, dope shops, liquor stores, pawn shops, hotels of questionable nomenclature, all up and down. That's the definition of it. And oversaturation of high-risk retail in underserved areas, to me, is a form of exploitation. And I think we as a policy-making body, it's our duty to prevent to the extent that we can, without infringing on people's rights to have a business, predatory clustering of these businesses in these type of communities. Because, Trevor made a very good case. You have the pawn shop, you have the dope store, you have the liquor store, you have the bus line. People get off the bus line, they may have been involved in some kind of nefarious activity, especially when you're dealing with drug and alcohol addiction. They're pointing things, they're going to the dope store, they're going to the liquor store. I believe the spirit of this intention is to help clean up these areas. And I believe, to your point, Councilmember Sundberg, that appropriate policing is also needed in these areas to clean up, what is happening. So I think it's important for us to consider that sometimes we have to help move things along. And in terms of allowing people to understand that these predatory businesses harm our communities and make our neighborhoods worse is something that we should consider as policymakers for our city.
Councilmember Gardner.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm going to go back 5 or so years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and there was an ordinance at the time to restrict restaurants from the drinks that they offered to kids. And at the time, fortunately, a majority of council agreed that was not the role of government. That was not the role of city council. Aurora was in the business, quote unquote, of staying out of the way and letting businesses operate and offer, legal products that they want to sell. And, here we are 5, 6 years later. Our job is not to interfere with legal products. It's not to interfere with the marketplace. If there is the market for 4 convenience stores at one corner, which I don't think there would be in many cases, but if there is, that's what the market can bear, then the market can bear that. Simply saying that these businesses cannot exist is not going to eliminate the need for them in our community. It's not going to eliminate people using these products. In a lot of cases, what it's going to do, it's going to drive it to the underground or to the black market where additional criminal activity happens. So instead of walking into a shop and buying a vape, you buy the vape out of somebody's trunk of their car that was stolen from somewhere else, and it leads to additional criminal activity. Prohibition of products or services or businesses has never worked in our country, and it will not work now. And when I hear things like these are harmful substances, well, alcohol is a harmful substance. Junk food and sugar are harmful substances. And we should not go down this slippery slope of telling legal businesses what they can and can't sell and where they can and can't operate in our city. We should let the market dictate that. And to Councilmember Sundberg's point, if there's criminal activity happening, then we should enforce the law. We should have the police there enforcing the crimes that are on our books, but simply saying that we're not going to allow these businesses does not make use of those products go away.
Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, question for Trevor. Why can't we enforce, code enforcement enforced laws when you see those places that you can't even look through the window? I mean, I don't understand why we can't close them down for that.
Yeah, great question. And we are, I mean, as I mentioned with that liquor store, worked on cleaning that up, and we've also got notice out on that pawn store as well. This ordinance primarily, when you look at it, is primarily about distance restrictions, and then also kind of highlights, with these types of businesses, that, if you're not maintaining them up to those standards or you have a repeated pattern, it's an aggravating factor to do it. So it kind of layers on top of that. Along those lines, the ordinance also talks about these businesses implementing SEPTED standards, and that would include things, including, making sure that the establishment looks nice, has good surveillance, and maybe perhaps some additional steps in those areas, just simply, as they've been seen in other cities, some of these locations have more incidents and higher risk of crime kind of in their areas, and trying to reduce those risks.
So can we not do something to strengthen maybe our code so that we can go after them? Like, it just seems like maybe we should try doing some things first proactively to discourage, those businesses that are just, falling apart basically in a community. I wish we would just take one step first to try to address that before we move, to precluding businesses. I mean, I do appreciate Councilmember Sundberg's comments about the free market and about competition. I also do think, from a law enforcement perspective, we need to do a better job of making sure that people are following the law, and if they're not, then pursuing them. So I would like to see strengthening some of the codes, maybe.
Further discussion? Okay. Let me just say, I mean, if you there's just a concentration of homeless, there's a concentration of addiction in certain parts of the city, particularly in the Colfax corridor between Peoria and Yosemite, that we're trying to change that. And it's hard to get some oxygen in there for revitalization or redevelopment when every other store is a liquor store, or it's a motel that's engaged in prostitution and in drugs. And so it's a tough area. And so this says prospectively, let's not have that concentration that feeds that kind of behavior. Is there any further comments? Is there any objection to moving item number 3B forward?
I object.
Okay.
Gardner.
Okay. I have Councilman. I'm
Sorry.
sorry, Wells, Bergen.
Well, I would probably want to do an amendment if it does move forward.
But are you opposed to it moving forward?
As is, yes.
Okay. Further objection to moving item number 3B forward? Item number 3B will move forward. Item number 5A, implement earned wellness program for Aurora Police Department. Let me defer to Councilmember Hancock on this.
Well, Mayor, I know we have do we have staff that we're going to talk about this as well?
Chief Chamberlain on the line.
Because initially we had talked about making sure that our police officers were, once through training, had a continuing standard of wellness, both physically, mentally, spiritually, all the way around, so that they can better serve our community. I see Officer Campagna.
Who from APD speaking on this issue?
Hi, Mayor Sergeant Thomas Campagna here, and my partner Sergeant Carlos Wilkendorfer here on behalf of the chief.
Very well. Please proceed.
You bet. Program overview for the Earned Wellness Program for the Police Department is a proactive initiative designed to strengthen the physical well-being of the Aurora Police Department members. Participants demonstrate commitment through standardized fitness assessment, earning recognition of proficiency, a mark of discipline, resilience, and readiness. This program builds a culture where wellness is a valued and celebrated thing, fostering camaraderie and promoting high standards of performance. Members who achieve proficiency are formally recognized with a Special Achievement Service Ribbon, symbolizing their accomplishment. Our program goals are simple. We want to encourage physical wellness and resilience, recognize achievement through measurable performance standards, and promote pride, accountability, and excellence across the department. We will require a 90% proficiency standard, which provides a clear and motivating benchmark for all members. The achievement pin serves as a visible marker of success and commitment to wellness that we'll wear on our uniforms as well. It will work simply. It's a test combined required aerobic assessment with the flexible strength and endurance components as well, ensuring fairness while allowing members to demonstrate personal strengths. We'll have a required portion of it, and then we will allow a la carte selection of up to 4 exercises. The required component is going to be a beep test, which is a running portion. Cones are placed 20 meters apart, and you are to run between the cones during a series of beeps, which level at every 8 beeps. We have a example video for those of you who want to look at it. We can post it if you'd like. To continue, the a la carte selections are metronome push-ups, TRX inverted row is to say that you hang from a TRX strap and pull yourself up between it. Pull-ups, 6 minimum, and then a prone plank. So you'll have to pick 2 of those in order to achieve that performance standard we're looking for. To achieve recognition, participants must complete the beep test and 2 selected exercises, as I said. The score of 90% or above proficiency in the beep test, and they must meet minimum requirements in the selected exercises as well. Upon successful completion, they'll receive the service ribbon that they can wear on their uniforms. Ultimately, this is an answer to our approach to whole wellness for police officers. We've already answered the need quite handily for psychological wellness and the provisions we've provided therefore. Also, this is our approach to bringing whole and well-rounded wellness to the physical aspect as well. I'm open for questions if anybody'd like to ask any.
Questions of staff? Okay, thank you, Councilmember Hancock, for working on this. One thing I was surprised that I think there's objective criteria for all the awards that are given in APD and AFR, and I didn't realize that there's in the Civil Service Commission, there's no system of giving sort of credence to those awards. For those of you that have been to the APD or AFR award ceremony, that they aren't counted in terms of promotion. They ought to be. And that's something I'll bring, either bring it directly to the Civil Service Commission itself, or bring it here as a resolution to go to the Civil Service Commission, that things like this be counted when considering promotion. Is there further?
So Mayor, I'll get.
What's that?
We feel the same. Sir.
Mayor, I'll get you. Yep, we'll get you the details, Mayor. Obviously, I think part of the things we're going to dive into on that is for each promoted rank, there is something called developed the book. So essentially it encompasses any awards, recognition, evaluation, things like that they've done. We're going to do a little more detail, get you how the book is scored. And then if that meets the what you're looking for, great. If not, we'll work with you on a resolution to see, what it is you're looking for.
Great, thank you. Okay, further discussion. Is there any objection to moving 5A forward? Seeing none, 5A will move forward. 5B, water service at restaurants. Councilmember Hancock.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I was muted. Thank you, Mayor. This is a constituent-led initiative, actually, that I worked with Marshall Brown and team just to suggest and water-saving measures for our community that restaurants ask people if they want water instead of just bringing it to the table. That will cut down on water waste and help us be better stewards and conservators of our water. Marshall, do you have anything to add? I know I put you on the spot there.
Yeah, sorry, had a hard time finding my mute button. Yeah, so the way this would work is during normal conditions, restaurant owners would be encouraged to just think about whether they want to have conversations with customers, and we would encourage them to think about not just by default putting water on the tables, but again, totally up to the restaurants during normal times. What it really does is during drought conditions, if we have a drought declaration, which we've had about one every 10 years so far, then restaurants would be required to ask or have the conversation with customers about the water before they put it on the table. Staff also had identified this as an opportunity, feeling like it was an opportunity to encourage additional conversations and educate on the scarcity of water, especially during times of drought or shortage. So that's how it's programmed to work in the proposal.
Okay. Further discussion?
Mayor Gardner.
Councilmember Gardner.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions and then a comment. So first off, who is going to enforce this?
Yeah, so enforcement would be a challenge. We're not planning on policing. What we are planning on doing is providing educational materials to restaurants, especially during times of drought or shortage. So there wouldn't be policing. It would just be communication and providing materials for restaurants to work with.
Okay,
it's more of an educational piece. Just
hold on, Councilmember Hancock. I'm still asking my question. So,
okay, sorry.
I know you're saying that it's encouraging, but this is an ordinance, meaning if a restaurant had automatic water service during a drought, that would be against the law, and per our code, there is a penalty for that. Correct?
This portion does not have a penalty necessarily built in. We haven't gone that far with it. So what it would require, if it came to our attention, we would reach out to the owner, require them or inform them of the requirement and encourage them, again, through some materials. We've talked about cards they could put on the restaurant tables that say, hey, we're in a drought. If you'd like water, please ask, things like that. So there's not a monetary penalty associated with it.
Okay, and maybe this is a question for the city attorney's office. Do we not have a general, ordinance violation penalty somewhere in our code?
We do, Councilmember Gardner, and the first section, it's called general penalty, up to 364 days in jail and up to a $2,650 fine. We could exempt the ordinances like this out of the general penalty, or put in the ordinance that there will be no penalty except for X. I'm just not, and I can probably talk to my team who actually wrote the ordinance to see if they did anything specific. It doesn't sound like that they did, but that could be added to the ordinance to satisfy your concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would be in favor of doing this as a resolution, and the water department spending money encouraging restaurants to not do automatic water service and whatever. But to make it a law that, as Pete just noted, could potentially result in up to 364 days in jail. When I'm a business, I'm not going to be concerned about, well, we're in a drought now, I can't do automatic water service, and now we're out of a drought, I can go back to it. Like, that's really confusing. I think we should certainly do some kind of communications outreach, encouraging restaurants to get away from automatic water service via resolution, but I don't think something like this belongs in ordinance, so I will not be supporting it.
Further discussion?
Mayor
Mayor,
Jurenski.
this is Councilmember Lawson. I have a question for Mayor.
Councilmember Lawson
Can
and
I speak?
Councilmember Driscoll.
Yeah, so Marshall, for this ordinance that you're doing, how much, I mean, I just never heard of such a thing. So you're trying to say that when we get water at restaurants, that's really making water conservation, we're really having issues with that? I mean, I have never in my life have ever heard of something like this, of any city doing this. And I didn't even know that it would be such a substantial amount of water for people who get water, because most people at a table drink water on top of whatever they get. So can you tell me, where did you get this from? Who's doing this in the United States? And why is it such a concern for water at a restaurant compared to other things that we could actually put some type of provision on? Make it make sense to me, because it just doesn't at this point.
Yeah, so as Councilmember Hancock mentioned earlier, this was not necessarily council or staff initiated. It was constituents who had observed this happening in other water systems. There's multiple entities in California that during the droughts decided to go this direction. Staff had observed the same thing when they reached out to peer utilities, that during drought restrictions, primarily in California, some water systems had done this type of a campaign. They had built this into their water conservation plans or water management plans, where primarily they were providing informational material in restaurants and encouraging people to be conscientious about water. So you are correct. It's not a huge volume of water compared to overall system use. For example, the opportunity that was identified, recognized initially by some constituents, and then staff reached out and confirmed it is going on in a few places, and they liked the idea of the educational component and the additional conversations associated with water scarcity and just helping people understand that we were in a drought if we have a drought declaration. So did that answer your question?
I agree with the resolution, but not an ordinance.
And perhaps
Councilmember Hancock.
And perhaps I would be totally okay with the resolution. I'm not trying to be draconian and say, okay, we're going to do this and everybody's going to like do the water or else we're going to fine you $8 million. That wasn't the point. That wasn't the point at all. The point was just for us to, let's just lighten it up just a little bit. I just wanted to make people aware. We always talk about water. I went to the water policy committee before we even got here. So my only inquiry, because as I say, this is a constituent driven resolution, and I'm remembering who I work for. So I'm trying to do what our citizens are asking us to do. We're always talking about ways to get water, how much water is important to our growing city, how we should be thinking about conservation measures so that we don't get to a critical point where water is a problem for our city. So this is simply it's not a law. If that's what we need to address it, and Pete, help a sister out to make it be more suggestive. We're not trying to be draconian and fine people. We want people to be aware of our city, our water stewardship, and how we should be with that. That's all this was meant to be.
Okay, Mayor, real quick.
Peter,
so real quick, it sounds like, so Councilmember Hancock, it looks like what you're going to ask council to move forward is a resolution educating and encouraging Marshall and his team to spread the word about water conservation in this regard. Is that fair?
That is fair. Yes, that is fair.
Okay. Well, you don't have to. You can obviously bypass the policy committee, study session and take something directly to the floor, or you can withdraw it at this time and bring back a resolution. What would you like to do, Councilmember
I
Hancock?
think at this time, because of the temperature, I will withdraw at this time, and then I will reintroduce it. Pete will work together and make this what it should be, so it can be of its best effect.
Okay, Councilmember Jurenski.
Thank you. I find this so funny that I'm going to support it in any capacity, matter of fact, because the restaurant industry is the most targeted. Our state legislatures banned styrofoam boxes and forced us to purchase plastic to-go boxes, even though plastic bags in stores are bad. I'm getting ready to just tell people to bring in their own damn Tupperware. Really, to be quite honest with you. So people can just start bringing in their own bottles of water. Maybe we need to expand this conversation to the health department and allow outside drinks. They can bring in bottled water. This is pretty funny to me. The last time we had a drought, I don't know if y'all remember, but a tree floated by my house. So the drought thing I also find very funny. But I think this is a good one. Me as a mom and pop restaurant, I don't automatically bring water to tables. Maybe we're talking more of the corporate chains. I don't really know. I don't really drink anything but water, so I'm always going to order water. But I find this one to be rather funny. So, I'll just tell people to bring their own Tupperware and their own bottle of water. It is what it is in Aurora.
Councilmember Coombs.
Thank you, Mayor. And Councilmember Jurenski, I have been thinking about bringing my own Tupperware because it does actually drive me a little nuts that you all have to give us all this stuff that then we have to decide whether to keep it in our cabinet afterwards or not. Anyway, that one was a side tangent. What I was really only raising my hand to say was to Councilmember Hancock, I think it probably makes sense when you're ready to just bring this back to study session. We did talk about it in Water Policy Committee and asked our questions. So I don't think you need to come back through the entire process. I think unless anyone else on the committee disagrees with me, I think we're good to see this back in study session.
Very well. Further discussion? Seeing none, Councilmember.
Sorry. If she's going to bring it back as a resolution, I would say just bring it to the floor.
Councilmember Hancock.
Okay, I will.
Okay. Very well, but she's withdrawing it at this time, and it has it's her discretion to bring it to the floor. Seeing no further business before the Aurora City Council, we will, for those who will be attending the listening session, we will reconvene in the listening session at 6:10 p.m. Thanks, everybody.